So the election's over. Maybe it's time to go on vacation. A lot of people like the outcome. They figured, hey, it's all done. It's okay. I'll check back in 4 years. Here's my question. If we do that, what are the odds 4 years from now we're going to be happy with the outcome?
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair. Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
The odds are pretty good we won't be happy with the outcome. You know, I know we've brought up Lou Holtz a few times on 1850 Main Street, and that's one of the things he talked about when he was at the University of Notre Dame. They talked about getting to number one, the work to get there, the work to get to the top. That's when people were working hard. But once they got there and they tried to just maintain, you know, the status quo was good enough. No, when you get there, that's when you've got to work the hardest, because it's much harder to stay there and get the work done than it is to get there in the first place. So I think unless people get to work, 2026 and 2028 will look much different.
So we're getting lots of questions about what's next and what do we do? And I'm mindful that there's three words that almost always seem to work in a situation like this. And those three words are get to work. Get to work. And you say, well, okay, fine. What are we going to do? Well, we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about the urgency of understanding why the celebration is not that great of an idea. All right. And I noticed, by the way, Alan, that Rob is now into his mid-season basketball voice.
Who did you scream at?
Yeah. So I hopefully it's not the refs. He's yelling at the players and not the refs. Okay. But I think
it might be the parents,
yelling at somebody, right?
Can I say that?
Yeah. I know he's been yelling at somebody. I can feel that sideline voice is starting to show up.
The art of teaching, right? That's what I say. We're teaching.
At loud volume and crowded gyms, yes.
Only a couple more years of this. I promise I'm counting down the days. Only a few more years.
You got to project from the stomach so you don't tear out the vocal cords. Yeah.
Yes. So it's exceptionally difficult for a guy who is officiated at the levels that he has, both collegiate and in regards to getting his way into some assisting work in the pros. You know, the gyms are crowded and loud and hot and warm and where you are and you back at the high school coaching level a little. And yeah, I can tell you've been at it. I can tell. So
yeah, it's early in the season. We only had a few days of practice and we've been in the gym. And I think Northeast Ohio weather may have a little bit to do with it as well. As it's 82 one day and I think it's 38 the next day. So
all right. So that's that. We'll attribute that. So let's go to get to work. What do we got to do? The folks that were defeated in this last election, and there were a lot of people that were defeated. George Soros and John Podesta were defeated. Eric Holder was defeated. They had a number of ballot initiatives that the Billionaires Club was trying to make work. They lost. They particularly lost a very big gerrymandering proposal in Ohio. And that's problematic for them because even though Ohio is by far, I mean, it's like a 6-1 margin in regards to independents outnumbering either of the political parties. Still at that, Soros and company want to gerrymander Ohio because they can't stop the independents from voting more and more conservative. And it's been going on now for 20 years. The move has happened. So where Ohio might be considered a deep red state, kind of, sort of, maybe, what's certain is it's not a Democrat state any longer. And Soros is having a hard time winning over independent voters in the Buckeye State. Now, that's just one state. But the pattern is there's a nibbling away at the traditional bases. You take a look at what happened in California in the last election. Surprising. There's a line developing down the center of the state saying, wait a second, there's resistance to the one-party regime of California. This is statistical realities. We're not making this stuff up. And as an independent organization, we're not playing for one side or the other. Now, we certainly want to be conservative, that's for sure. But you both parties are in trouble.
They are in trouble. And you talk about California. California, I mean, do you have an over and under on the date you think their votes will be done being counted? I mean, I was
Yeah, I
talking.
do. One day after Arizona.
Yeah, I was talking to someone that works for a Secretary of State's office, and the only thing I said I would like to compare the budgets per capita, California to some of these other states that are able to get it done in a day, that they're able to handle their business, get it done, report the votes cast, and then compare that to California and let me know how that turns out. Because each and every year, if California was a state that was in play for a Senate seat, or actually it is for balance of the House, they're delaying some of the results for balance of the House. So there's work to be done in California and everywhere as well.
Yeah, and I think that the federal Congress has got to look at this, because this is stopping the business in the House and the Senate. And of course, if you could imagine right now, if this presidential election had come down to Arizona, and it could very well have done so. I mean, we had multiple models that showed it could have been all coming down to those votes, either Nevada or Arizona. And you think about that, and you imagine the chaos that we would be in right now in this country. I think that Congress has got to come up with some constitutional way, without violating states' rights and without violating any rights for any individual voter, to basically say, you have to have these ballots counted by X. It's just that simple. If you want to play in this game, you have to have them counted by X.
Well, and that's just a side note on that.
By the way, I didn't mean Elon Musk would count the votes. I meant by X date on the calendar.
You got to be careful now using that, I suppose.
Yeah. Wow.
No, but that's the one thing. Whether you're happy about the results of the election or not, I think at least on one hand, the nation was spared because it was people are calling it a mandate almost, because it was so widespread, because it was popular vote for the presidency and electoral college and so many seats in the House and the Senate. I think nobody's fighting over margins right now. I think that's at least something positive. No matter if you liked it or you didn't like it, you're at least not fighting about a close election. So that's a blessing, I think.
Yeah, we know what the results are on election day, but now, as Dave said, it's get to work. Time to get to work.
Yeah.
Let's see what the results are over the next 18 months or 2 years or 36 months, because that will play into how the American people feel and how they turn out in the following election.
Well, so do you think part of getting to work is holding elected representatives accountable for the things that they said they were going to do on the campaign trail? I think that's part of getting to work.
Yeah, that's a big one, Alan. And we know that's always a train wreck, because the promises that have been repeated over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they often are repeated with the I will this or I will that. Or a federal lawmaker says, I passed the bill that such and such, but yeah, right. Like any member of Congress writes a piece of legislation. Come on. They got $1 million every year in budget just for staff and run that office. They got plenty of people writing the stuff. Doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about, but they all bloviate on the campaign trail. It drives me crazy. And then the media turns back around and says, well, under the Biden administration or under the Trump administration, whoa. Who's under? What do you mean under? Are they like the lords of the manor and we are the house serfs? I mean, what the heck? The language is really ridiculous, and language does matter. So as far as get to work goes, yeah. How do you work on holding these people accountable? Well, I think the thing that you've got to do more than anything else is you got to communicate with them. You have to communicate with them. So how do you communicate with your member of the United States House of Representatives and your senator if you're concerned about the federal law? How do you do that? Well, first off, you have to understand that a U.S. senator obviously has a state to serve. Small state, big state, it's still geographically, very few of them are tiny. So they're going to have multiple offices. If you want to get in touch with your local United States senator, or your state senator, your U.S. senator for your state, the best thing to do is to reach out at the local office level. Because you try to go through Washington, D.C., and you're facing every security structure and backdoor internet, blah, blah, blah. Make a phone call to the local office and say, this is who I am. I'm a constituent. I have a concern. May I send you a letter? And what would be the best way to get the letter read? I know the senator's not going to see this letter unless you send it to them. I just want to know, how do I get it to you? Be humble. Start small. Start small. It's also not a bad idea to make it a pattern in your life before you get involved with these people that you're praying for them. I think we should pray for them. We had a formula for years. We talked about pray, participate, communicate. Prayer is always going to be first one, because the last thing that any politician needs is one more opinion. If we're going to offer something of value, it should have some eternal merit. It should have some value that goes beyond just this is what I want, and a forbidden statement ever.
I know what's coming.
What's coming? You work for us. Please, if that's what you're wanting to say, just don't write or call. That is so demeaning and so insulting and so bizarre. We should be willing and helpful in prayer and through acts of mercy and acts of kindness and acts of service. We should be trying to help them. They represent us. Yes, that's true. Our taxes pay their salary. Yes, that's true. But they pay taxes too. And well, we just want to take our country back. Well, let me ask you something. You can call it your country if your name's on the Declaration of Independence. But if it's not, it's all our country. And we really need to exhibit some sincere humility about public service, because public service is the way to get to work. The team that wins is the team that outserves the other one. So we can start by having right relationships with our elected officials.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what is really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for the lamppost. Find out what America is really talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
And that goes as well with the discourse, as you mentioned, that you have with them as well as your neighbors. I mean, I think we've fallen into that trap. You use the phrase, don't use the phrase, you work for us. And I'm in agreement. How many times does something get accomplished when you start the conversation by screaming at someone and telling them what you want? But we have this feeling like we pay taxes, therefore that gives us the right to act like an idiot half the time. And that doesn't work. It reminds me of the guy who, goes into the sporting event, gets thrown out of a high school or a college sporting event for screaming at the coaches and players. Well, I paid for the right to be here. Well, Jesus loves you. The rest of us think you're an idiot. Go home. Like, come on.
And that's the edited version of that phrase. Yeah. That's like
the edited version of Lou Holtz's bumper sticker.
Yeah. That's like using the phrase "I told you" or because I said so as a parent. Like, you can say that, and yes, your kid should do it because you said so, but that doesn't work. And maybe you should use it as a teaching moment. Like, well, I said this because X, Y, Z. Use it as a teaching moment. So, I mean, I'm not saying I've never said that.
I feel like that was directed to me. Maybe a little parental counseling I'm getting here. Yeah. I get it.
I used that phrase this past week. I did. I've got a teenager now, so I used it.
So what else does get to work look like? Well, it means paying attention. Don't let your senator recede into the woodwork only to be seen and heard again in 6 years. Don't be afraid to put it on your to-do list of once this year or twice this year, I'm going to jot a note to my United States senator, send it to the local office of that person I spoke with, because they do keep track and it does matter. And if you are a communicator with that local office of a United States senator, they go looking when the heat gets turned up as to see who's turning up the heat, and they'll look and see. So you can have a contextual relationship, one that's in the context of the right roles and based on service and kindness and care. That's important. You'll have more influence with your member of the United States House because their local office is going to be in your hometown. And so that's the kind of situation where you can call, you can write. Now, you have to be careful in each office, in each city, in each locality. Some places are very open to people visiting the local office. Others want you to call in advance. If you call in advance and make an appointment, don't come empty-handed. I'm a firm believer. Bring a box of donuts. Okay, bring a box of the local. You're not going to get sued for lobbying or bribing anybody for handing a box of local chocolates to the local staff. Be kind, be nice. Do not ever offer any politician any sort of things like a gift card or money. Don't ever. Even in the most noble intentions, like it's their birthday, you have an automatic habit. You always put a $10 gift card into any birthday card. Don't do that. Don't do that. So you never yell at them and you never attempt to curry favor with them. Okay, that doesn't work either. But kindness goes a long way. Okay, kindness goes a long way. And it should be that. And again, my suggestion is that you never ask a politician for anything. We've been in business for a long time. We've been in service now since 1980. I can tell you it is rare, if ever, that we have asked a politician for a specific vote or to take a specific position. We've asked if we can talk about the ideas that are on our mind and ask them what they think.
Yeah, we ask a lot of questions and we express concerns, but we ask questions. If they favor a policy that maybe we don't like, we're asking the question, hey, what do you think will happen in this situation? Or, hey, how do you think this is going to have an impact on this pre-existing law? Like, where do you see that going? And we listen and we have the discussion that way. We don't go in lecturing.
Yeah. I mean, and we may call them all kinds of names privately, which I hope we don't. I hope I don't. But I mean, it's one thing when you're walking around in your bedroom in your pajamas and saying what you think to your spouse or to the wall, whatever the case might be.
A story comes to mind, Dave. A story comes to mind. So it was with Melanie Elsie, National Legislative Director of the American Policy Roundtable. We go to Columbus to meet with the AG's office on gambling legislation. It's probably 15 years ago. It's a long time ago. And we had done some media interviews and we said, well, the proposal would go against current state law. So it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't match up. And quite frankly, it's unconstitutional. And so we go and we sit down and there's this 5 lawyers on the other side of the table. And there's me and Melanie on one side. And they start the meeting and, hey, we read your remarks on what you said. Why would you say that? That's not true. And, I want to jump up on it. I want to get fired up. Melanie took the lead and she said, well, here's why we said it. And she took out her highlighter and she highlighted 2 items in the Constitution, the Ohio Constitution. And she circled a few things in state law and she slid the papers across the table and they all looked at them and they're looking at each other and you see some eyes get big and they know that they didn't see it and they were caught.
She just schooled them. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to jump up on the table and start screaming and laughing and being like, you got to be kidding me. But I just stood there and try and look poised and let Melanie do all the heavy lifting. And they said, we'll get back with you. Well, that legislation they were proposing went nowhere, but we didn't go in there guns. But no, I probably would have liked to at that age in my life, in that time in my life. But we went in cool, calm, collected, presented the facts. They listened. They called us back a week later and said, thanks. We missed that.
Now, I'm keenly aware at the huge gap between our average lives and a moment like that in the state legislature. 9,999 people out of 10,000 would never have that experience. We recognize that. And we're not suggesting that everyone that's listening to what we're talking about should suddenly become an expert in that. But what we are talking about is the distance between us and them has to shrink. Now, you may need some help if there's a specific piece of legislation that you're concerned about. You may have to make some phone calls and ask some questions. That's an okay place to start. But this stuff is not super complicated, and these people are bright, and some of them are geniuses. Some of them are incredibly bright. But most of them are above average. You don't get where you are, even as a state representative. You got to be smarter than the average bear to get there. It's work. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. But it's not beyond any one of us. So what you do is you get the legislation, you read the legislation for yourself, you ask some questions, you ask them to teach you and to inform you. All right, as you develop your positions and your concerns. Now you say, well, man, that's a lot of work. I'm a busy person. Yes, it's a lot of work, but we got to get to work because it's what the other people are doing. It's what the other people are doing. So we have to be involved. And I know as soon as I say this, it's like click, click, click. No one's going to listen. No one's going to pay attention. That's not true. This is why 10 people can actually sway an entire debate, because they're the only 10 ones that were willing to take an hour, get up to speed on something, and actually make an impactful conversation. And the lawmaker goes back and said, wow, 10 people came to my office and talked to me about this in the last 2 weeks. There must be 1,000 more who feel like they do.
Yeah.
See, this is the opportunity that we miss. So we tell you this is something that you should try at home, but you shouldn't try alone. So this is why organizations like the American Policy Roundtable exist. If you get yourself into a legislative situation, you need help, you need advice, call 1-800-522-VOTE. Go to info at aproundtable.org. Sorry, I was going into the individual states. Go to info at aproundtable.org. Type a message saying, I need some help. Can you give me a hand? Right? There are people there that will give you some help and give you some ways where's to go, and organizations that can help you and steer. But you pray, you participate, you communicate. These are 3 vitally essential things, and you will be surprised. Yeah. You will be astounded that if you can get an angle on something that you really understand, that you really are in favor for, or you're against, and you can have 10 more people talk to those lawmakers in their district, you will be stunned at the impact you can make. So that's one way we can get to service, get to work, is to begin to develop relationships with our elected officials. And there's no shortcut to this, folks. You can't send anybody a check to do it for you. I don't care who you are. You've got to be involved if you want to see the country change.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.